Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The Policy and Planning and Solid Waste Division staff, along with the Office of Sustainability, recommends the Board of Public Works approve and authorize the Director to execute solid waste disposal, WTE, or waste to energy, a new services agreement with Rerolled Indianapolis, Inc., formerly known as Covanta Indianapolis, Inc., with an agreement expiration date of December 31st, 2035. Due to the nature of services to be performed and an inability to foresee the volume of tonnage, there will not be a not to exceed amount under this agreement. This agreement will provide solid waste disposal services at Rerolled Indianapolis, Inc., a waste to energy facility, commencing on December 17th of 2025. Rerolled Indianapolis, Inc., formerly known as Covanta, will serve as the primary disposal facility for solid waste for the city of Indianapolis, Marion County. Solid waste will be burned at the facility to create renewable steam energy powering the local steam loop. Items ineligible to be burned at the facility will be taken to our secondary solid waste disposal site, Southside Landfill, as necessary. Currently, there are no opportunities under this agreement to utilize the services of an XBE vendor to complete the required work. This is due to the specialized nature. If an opportunity does arrive in the future for inclusion of XBE services, we will work with Rerolled Indianapolis, Inc. to ensure efforts are made to attempt to reach these goals. Rerolled Indianapolis, Inc. was selected through RFP 14 DPW 1614. This vendor was primarily selected due to a competitive disposal fee, vicinity of the facility to our solid waste garage, the inclusion of a steam revenue share within their proposal, and familiarity with vendors' expertise and amenability through current working relationships. I will also note that start date, I know for these other ones that we've brought forth, have commenced on January 1st of 2026, as they are our current vendor. And there's about a 2-week gap. We have just commenced the new agreement 2 weeks earlier. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Daniel. Do we have any questions?
I do have a couple.
Go ahead.
First, what are we doing to mitigate the impact of effectively burning trash? I mean, particularly on our Black and Brown communities. There was a study done 2-3 years ago from the American Lung Association that showed that, high rates of lung cancer and stroke within the plume of Covanta. And, on the other side of it, from an environmental justice standpoint, what are we doing with that?
That is a really great question. I would have to potentially get back to you with an answer on that. And speaking with our Office of Sustainability, I know that this is, part of the reason why we're wanting to expand universal curbside recycling. Oh, Sean can answer.
Hi, Sean Brock, Deputy Director for Solid Waste. Excuse me. I don't know that the city does anything necessarily per se, but it is our understanding that Covanta follows all of the IDEM rules, regulations regarding smoke exhalation, and as to the best of my knowledge, they have passed all their inspections. So
yeah, but
I don't
that
know
still
that
doesn't. I mean, there is clearly an impact on disproportionately impacted communities, and we're effectively extending that by 10 years here. I mean, even with the existing criteria, and who knows what's going to happen over the next 4 years. So, second question. So back in 2014, when this first came up, I was actually sitting in that city council meeting, and there were some folks on the council and I'm a council appointee, so there were folks on the council who expressed concern about whether this was going to be the future of sustainability in Indianapolis. Have you done any interaction, communication, coordination with the council so they're not surprised by this?
it's my understanding that prior to Sam, when Brandon was here, I believe he did have some interaction with the council.
Okay.
And thank you for the questions, Dan, and they're good questions, and I think we probably owe you some additional background that we can get to you after this meeting. I will say, just in general, you know, there's no perfect solution for how to dispose of solid waste. So everything has some sort of trade-off associated with it. You send it all to the landfill, there's implications from that as well. And while this isn't my particular area of expertise, you know, the thing that we can say is that our Office of Sustainability, who does have expertise in this area, was involved in this process from the start. You know, they were involved in the team that helped produce this RFP and review these proposals. So your concerns and your questions are valid. But what I'll say is our process has been pretty robust from a review standpoint and inclusion of that Office of Sustainability team. And, again, there's no perfect solution for what to do with this volume of waste. Natalie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Hi there, Natalie Van Dongen, Deputy Director of Policy and Planning. So what I would say is throughout the RFP process, we did request sustainability reporting through each proposal. I don't have that in front of me right now. I would be more than happy to get some of that information over to you. As Sam alluded to, our Office of Sustainability was engaged in the process and did assist with review of that, and that did actually factor into our scoring as well. So in terms of what they gave to us that was reviewed, that was scored upon, and that is something that we would be able to talk about. We'll be able to get to you later. Regarding the council question, due to the ongoing RFP process, we did sign NDAs. We have various procurement methods that we have to uphold in order to ensure that it is a fair procedure throughout. So we have not been able to report specifically on anything regarding this proposal or any of the other proposals we received to council. That is something that we will intend to do in the future once we have these contracts signed and put into place, but we've only been able to speak at a high level about our procurement process.
Yeah, but you can talk to them that you're going to. It bothers me that you have another branch of government that you're not talking to that represents half this board, and it sounds like we're signing a contract and talking to them after the fact.
So again,
I understand the conflict you're in. I'm just like, this is a policy decision to burn trash for another 10 years, and we're making it by an appointed board. Like, it just doesn't seem, it's a bigger decision than the Board of Public Works.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let others ask questions, and I want to explain my vote.
Yep, understood. Do we have questions from other members of the board?
I do. So with this particular agreement right here, is there any leeway to be able to set standards in terms of understanding what the health implications are within the community, even if even if they are agreeing to abide by all the rules and regulations? Is there room within the contract to be able to say, hey, here goes some other things that we want to put in place to make sure that our community is safer than even what is, regulated in terms of what they have to follow?
So air quality reporting and all metrics regarding air quality, including legislation that companies would be upheld to, are through the state. So in terms of what would have been formally included in a proposal or a contract, that's going to be controlled by state statute predominantly. I can't speak intelligently regarding what the exact contract language reads, but if that were a concern backed by data moving forward, that is something we would absolutely be willing to raise.
Other questions?
I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit. Understanding the regulations and state regulations that that they have to abide by, but we as a body or we as a city can set goals, right, that go over and beyond within the contracts that we establish with these organizations. Do you know if additional goals have been put into the contract to try to obtain during the 10 years of this contract?
I would have to do a deeper dive into that contract language. Again, I do know that the Thrive plan has been the predominant driving force as far as sustainability goals that have been included within all of these negotiations.
Other questions?
Yes, Dan, you mentioned that there's no limit on this contract on the upper cost of it, but is there an approximate value of what this contract is over the 10 years?
Sam would actually probably be able to answer that better than
I can speak to that, putting on my DPW CFO hat, if that's acceptable for a moment. So the contract spells out a specific processing rate that can be charged per ton. Because one of the stipulations of the contract with Covanta is, basically they're eligible to receive all our trash. That does not mean all our trash goes to them. As Daniel pointed out, some of it's going to be diverted to a secondary source. So I believe off the top of my head, the first year rate for processing is $42 a ton, which is a slight escalation from our existing contract with them of a few percentage points. If 100% of the city's solid waste were to be taken to them, which is not what's happening right now, but in theory, that's the top end of the threshold, the total dollar amount that they'd get out of the contract would be around $12 million, about. But again, in practice, a significant portion of that waste is not going to them. So in effect, it'll be worth less than that. But just to give you a sense of magnitude.
How much did we send last year?
How much did we send to Covanta? I can answer generally. I'm hesitant to give specific numbers because it will get stuck in people's heads, but Sean, you might know the answer to this more specifically than me, but I believe about maybe 2/3, is that correct, of our waste went to Covanta?
Yeah, I'd say it's roughly 2/3 or so right now. They had a lot of downtime because they were doing some improvements to the site, and so we're unable to take trash for several periods of time because of work they were doing on their boilers. And then there were diversion days due to weather, long lines, et cetera, that sort of thing. But yeah, roughly probably 60 to 70% of our trash goes there. Went there last year.
And I want to be clear, 60 to 70% of our trash gets burned, or 60 to 70% just goes to the landfill?
Went to the waste energy facility.
The waste energy facility for burning. Why do we burn trash?
So as mentioned, we did ask for sustainability metrics within each proposal, and that did include, any landfills that would have been submitting proposals as well. What I can share is that there are carbon impacts, methane impacts associated with landfill disposal in the same way that there are impacts associated with incinerators. What we have here is a situation where that does go, and there is a direct one-to-one way that what the energy created then goes to power our steam loop. So that is obviously factored in with sustainability reporting. We can absolutely get into more detailed responses regarding the sustainability reports that we were given, and what is being done to ensure that air quality is not a primary concern, that they're staying on top of item standards, they are ticking all the regulatory boxes. This was a very thorough process to ensure we understood exactly what our solid waste landscape looks like, and what the best, the way the cookie could crumble for the city, understanding the infrastructure available to us.
Additional questions?
Just one more question. So Covanta then, or Reworld sells the steam. Does the city participate in any of those revenues?
Yes, we do. We actually receive 10% of all of their steam revenue back, which again further then reduces that cost of utilizing that facility.
It equates, the share that we get has historically equated to about $2.5 million, but it is dependent on their sales, so it's not a hard number.
Is it possible to be able to have like a presentation on some of the studies that went into, particularly going into this contract, but also the air quality and things like that? I mean, this is a 10-year contract, and so I'm wondering if we could have some type of information from the study, from the intensive research that you all have done, and what would be the implications of us waiting on this particular item until we are able to have some more information with that study for this?
I suppose I'm kind of looking over to council on that front. I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts. Regarding the presentation? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that we would be happy to assist in,
Right.
yes, to assist in further education on that. The biggest implication with holding on this contract today is that obviously we have we're under a timeline that's pretty tight for this whole solid waste process. The biggest thing at this point being we can't really move further forward with our collections request for proposal process without providing certainty to those prospective vendors on where they're going to be taking these items. And at this point, we're now at the point where these vendors are going to have this year to be able to stand up infrastructure to maintain collections and continuity of service for residents, which is why we wanted to bring this today as a walk-on item to try to keep that process moving as fluidly as possible. But
I would say we would also need to, I was going to say, check in with our purchasing division to see, how we are able to kind of report on information received through proposals. I won't put purchasing on the spot at this very moment. That's just still a question that I have, having been presented this question here.
Yeah, I guess I want to agree with Sabiko. Some of our questions have good faith attempt has been made to answer them, for sure. It's just, it does give me pause that we're approving 10 years of continuing to burn significant amounts of trash. Typically with services agreements, in this case, we have pricing, we have an agreed pricing schedule. You get 60 days once you get that pricing in place, to approve the contract. But it sounds like this is allowing us to move forward with other processing. Now, this board does meet every 2 weeks. And so does 2 weeks completely throw off our schedule?
Hi. Pardon. Allison Sigmund, Procurement Manager, Purchasing Division, Office of Finance and Management. There is, as we've discussed, a confidentiality agreement or an NDA that everyone had to sign prior to this. We are at the position where we are now speaking about who we are willing to talk about and put forward. I believe a presentation might be able, but I don't know exactly how robust of a presentation I can offer due to usually we do not disclose those informations until contracts are signed. So once we have a signed contract in our digital contract system, then that information can be released to the public. Until then, it would have to be a closed board meeting at that point. And to answer the reason why this is done as an RFP as well as opposed to bids, which you hear about constantly, is because we have the ability to amend contracts as they happen. It's a more fluid process. We can bring up the possibility of an amendment as they are needed. So to answer any previous contract questions as well.
Considering Covanta has been our service provider for this in the past, how many additional bids did we receive for this work? Did we receive any?
Specifically for solid waste disposal, we received 3 respondents.
And I don't know how much more detail we can really go into than that, given the non-disclosure agreements. All right. Do we have any more questions about this or discussion that needs to happen before a motion? Hearing none.
Are we going to vote on the approval? Is there voting on the approval on next time I vote?
I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure what other option we have other than to vote on the approval of it, and then we'll just go from there.
So, before I say it, this is not directed at you. I was a public sector person in the past. I've stood in your shoes, so
I do not take this personally at all.
So, I think, like, first, burning trash isn't sustainable and it's not renewable. Like, it's just fundamentally not. I get the world is complex, but it's not. And I think as a city, if we want to do better, we actually have to do better. And that requires hard decisions and leadership and pushing recycling back 2 years and then coming back next month and saying we're burning trash is not doing that. So I'll be voting no.
Understood. Okay. Do we have other, Natalie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Have we touched on the minimum tonnage question? So I think something that has come up previously with the past iteration of this agreement is that minimum tonnage requirement that is not carried over through this contract. So I do think that's an important point. Also, you did raise it. So the conversation regarding universal curbside recycling, I know the IBJ has had a story go out. So I think there's a very robust conversation we can have about that. What I would say is these new contracts go into effect 2026. There is an entire infrastructure, regional infrastructure required to ensure that recycled content can actually be processed and utilized within our region, within the U.S., and to ensure that we are not creating a problem, a sustainability problem, by trying to do something that is beneficial for the regional sustainability efforts. So I am very confident with the way that we have gone about this process, but also are moving forward with the universal curbside recycling commitment in a way that I believe will not only allow for continuation of current services that needs to be a priority. We need to make sure that our trash schedule can be maintained, that residents who have come to expect these municipal services are still receiving them, but also the expansion of service to universal curbside recycling. A very large component of that is also the need to educate residents. I attended a conference called Pivot that's hosted by the Recycling Partnership, which is a national organization that specializes in municipal recycling specifically, and the entire conference was essentially about maximizing diversion through education. The best way for us to ensure that these recyclable contents are able to be used and reused is to ensure that we have a population that is educated on what is recyclable, and it will not be treating a second cart as another trash cart. So there is time that is needed to do that. And to that end, by maximizing diversion through a universal curbside recycling program, we're also minimizing the amount of waste we are creating that cannot be reused. So I think that's what I would respond to that with, understanding that we are very committed to providing more information. We're just at kind of an awkward spot in the process to do so.
Another comment really is that I believe that there is a recycling of metals through the incinerator, isn't there? I mean, all that gets burned doesn't go into the landfill, right?
Sean is shaking his head yes.
Yeah. So there is an element to that. I don't know how big it is, but there is an element to that. Otherwise, that recyclable material would end up in the landfill, which isn't good for anybody either. So, just a point.
All right. Are there any other questions or discussion points? All right. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the service agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, so we got that? All right. Hearing that, it appears the motion carries.